5 seconds of silence. As soon as I figure out where this fluff is, it's right around my eyebrow or eyelash. Just every now and then pops into view.
Oh, that's awful.
I think I'm good. All right. Welcome to episode 44 of Upshift, No Direction Network podcast that gives you an edge on Essence20. I'm Ryan Cassetto, one of the designers of the Essence20 system, and an author on the G.I. Joe Transformers My Little Pony role-playing game core rulebooks, as well as over a dozen other Essence20 products from Renegade. And you are?
I didn't put that in here, did I?
Nope.
Ah. And I'm Charles Cushman.
Before we begin, although I have worked for Renegade on Essence20, Upshift is not associated with or produced by Renegade Game Studios. This is not an official Essence20 podcast, and any opinions we share are our own. Okay. Adjusted a little bit. Are our own. Still a little bit clunky, but I'm not sure how to fix that one.
It's kind of growing on me. It's you manage to land it every time, so I'm like, hey, that's good work.
Before I get to the topic, a couple of logistic issues. You see that's the window behind me? I hate that window. It always throws off the light in the room, and worst is that we're right around Montreal sunset, and so my lights are dimmed real low, but I'm super clear right now. A little too clear. My forehead's blown up by this light. By the end of the episode, I might be in total darkness, and I cannot just reach over and adjust my lights. So, fair warning, the lighting will change during the episode, and I really do need to get a blocker for that window. The other logistic issue is that we are dog sitting, and so I'm in the basement, and we have hidden 3 balloons in the next room. At any point during this recording, those balloons might pop. Now, this is not a Schrodinger's pistol type of situation. No, not Schrodinger's pistol. Chekhov's pistol.
Chekhov's balloons.
Chekhov's balloons. It's not, because they're not guaranteed to pop by the end of the episode. I'm just saying, there might suddenly be an explosion. No cause for alarm. It's just a balloon. Let me take a sip of my tea, and then I'm ready to get into the actual topic.
Yeah, I managed to improve my lighting situation so I can actually be seen. The downside is that I now look like a vampire. And not like a cool vampire, but like a Twilight era vampire, because I am so glowingly white.
I often wonder, this is a tangent already, but I often wonder if Twilight Sparkle's name comes from the fact that the vampires in Twilight sparkle.
Feels like that. Was it from the right era?
It's right around the same time. I'm pretty sure Twilight came first.
Oh, well, then maybe they did the movie that way.
Which movie?
The Twilight movies. They based it off the ponies.
No, I'm pretty sure I think it was the opposite. Maybe not even intentional. I don't know. It's something I'd rather just continue to wonder and never look up.
Fair enough.
Case, a couple of weeks ago, I took for granted how much you knew about the Transformers ONE sourcebook. I just kind of threw it out there as though everyone knows the Transformers ONE sourcebook is out. Which is totally weird, because normally when a new book comes out, we do an episode dedicated to it, especially if it's a book that I worked on. And yeah, I'm glad that you grabbed my reins and were like, slow down there, little doggy. What are we talking about, Transformers ONE sourcebook? So here we are. We're going to be looking at the Transformers ONE sourcebook, and we cannot do that without looking at the Transformers ONE movie. And we can't look at that without talking about the emotional roller coaster that the lead up to the Transformers movie took us on. So, I know you've said that you don't watch movies as often as you used to. Did you see Bumblebee, the Bumblebee solo movie?
Yes, I did, on a plane.
Oh, well, how about that? So, Bumblebee starts with a scene set on Cybertron, and for the next 5 minutes, it is a love letter to Generation 1. Everyone in that scene looks like they did in G1, acts like they did in G1 for what a little acting we see most of the characters doing. They sound like it for the ones that have any dialogue. It was amazing. It overshadows the rest of the movie. A lot of people forget John Cena is in that movie, but nobody forgets the first 5 minutes of Bumblebee. And so, from shortly after that, even though Bumblebee was a commercial failure, it was a critical success. It is the only Transformers movie that is largely accepted as a good movie. Like, they're all fun, but that one's the one that people say, like, but that's actually really well made. It's everything about it is good, especially the first 5 minutes. And so shortly after the movie came out, it was announced that Hasbro was working on a feature-length movie set on Cybertron, a flashback movie, and they kept evoking the first 5 minutes of Bumblebee as like, this is the movie that you will get. And, things went silent for a while, as things do after a movie is announced. And then Siege came out on Netflix, which is a Transformers miniseries set on Cybertron. It's an origins of the Transformers Civil War. And so some of us were saying like, oh, is that what happened? It started as a movie and it just became a Netflix series? It's like, no. Apparently Hasbro was developing two separate Transformers origins set on Cybertron animated projects at the same time. Siege just happened to come out first. And then the same thing, Siege Season 3 was all about Autobots, meeting up with Maximals. And then Rise of the Beast came out. Like, that one series was the redundant series for everything else that was going on in development. I don't know. It was odd. Especially because it has had so little impact for a Transformers series on the largest streaming platform in the world. In any case, finally we heard, yes, it's been cast, it's got a great cast, and there's going to be a trailer in space. So what happened was they loaded the trailer onto a hard drive with a monitor attached to it and a camera pointing at the monitor. This was all put on a drone or something, sent up, breached the stratosphere, and then they played the trailer while the camera filmed the screen and streamed that to YouTube. All of which has completely been forgotten. It was just this weird marketing choice that was also overshadowed by the contents of the trailer themselves and the negative reaction the trailer received. Now, before we get into the trailer reaction, Charles, what do you think about watching a trailer from space? First ever trailer from space.
I feel like it was like that unpaid intern just going, you know what? Now hear me out. Like that meme where the guy got thrown out the window. This is the guy that probably ought to have got thrown out the window because that just seems like an enormous use of resources that didn't really pay off.
Yes, for a lot of reasons. Like, you could see the connection, like, okay, this one's set in space, set on a different planet, so we'll release the trailer in space. But yeah, nobody was talking about that part of the gimmick except in confusion. But then the trailer came out and people hated the trailer. The main reaction was that the trailer felt very childish. Now, I am going to say, in defense of Transformers fans, or the by and large, I think Transformers fans are good at compartmentalizing the target audience of a project. Because more than almost any other franchise, Transformers will have the kid stuff, and then the adult stuff, and the collector stuff, and the stuff that's supposed to bridge the gaps. And so Transformer fans will not complain about a show that's clearly supposed to be for kids being aimed at kids. But this one, because it was always evoking that first 5-minute love letter to the 80s Transformers in what little we heard about it over the years it was in development, as soon as it was released and it's like, oh no, this is immature and the humor is silly. And not just silly, but it felt cliched. Like, all the jokes felt familiar even though it was the first time we were hearing them. And so people really railed against this movie. It was one of the worst first impressions of movies ever had that I've ever seen. And I cannot say how much the reaction to the first trailer affected the box office, but I can say Transformers ONE had a pretty bad box office. It underperformed, and that's unfortunate because, once again, like Bumblebee, this is a great movie. This is one of the best things with the Transformers name on it. When I saw it and left the theaters, I said then, and I still believe, this is the best Transformers thing I've ever seen.
Wow.
Yeah. In fact, the other day I rewatched the first 5 minutes of Bumblebee because that's just one of those scenes that I'll rewatch when I've got 5 minutes and I'm just finishing my tea before bed. For the first time, that felt like the less than product. There was now something better than the first 5 minutes of Bumblebee for me, a lifelong Transformers fan. And that was Transformers ONE in its entirety.
High praise. I didn't watch it. I don't get around to watching anything ever. Basically, I watch some dropout TV, and I cancel all the other streaming services because I simply don't have time to watch television anymore. It was only in theaters, correct?
It eventually released to streaming, but yeah, it wasn't released theaters and streaming simultaneously. We were past that period, and now this went straight to theaters. I got to see it because I won a contest with the Electric Playground. They said just write in with like your favorite Autobot or whatever, and I was like, sure. I've learned that you might as well enter the contests because far fewer people enter contests online than you would think. And as long as it's a reputable source and it's not asking for any personal information, yeah, you throw your name out there. And so I got to see a press screening. I got 2 tickets. I went with my friend Will. He and I worked at Laughing Dragon Studios, an animation studio, and we both left that movie. Oh, and he's 10 years younger than me, so we both have a different relationship with Transformers. We both work in the animation industry, but on very different parts of it. He does the editing, I do the writing, and we both left like just technically, that's a great movie from a writing and an editing and a pacing and everything point of view. The performances were great. The story is so smartly written. The characters are so deeply, like they've been given so much depth. And yet it also is one of the best examples of a prequel that still lines up with the media that you know about it. Like it's not technically tied to any existing Transformers continuity, other than the aligned continuity thing where like technically Unicron exists as the same creature. Or no, the Fallen. The Fallen is these anytime the Fallen shows up, it's the same guy, and he just crosses dimensions. So other than speaking super broadly that technically all Transformers exists in one continuity that is all scattered across the multiverse, this is its own continuity, and yet it also ties in perfectly with the G1 series. Like it definitely feels like you could draw a straight line with very few contradictions from this to G1. And just in general, that's just what we know of as the Transformers backstory is being explored while still not feeling like it's a heavy exposition movie. Like it's just, think of anything that goes into a movie, Transformers One does it well.
Hmm. So no, again, this will be another one of those things that I wasn't going to do, and then I talked to you, and then I am going to do it. So I definitely will. I will definitely watch it now. But I'm just, it'll be very interesting to see. I've dealt with so many Transformers. It's its own multiverse, as you pointed out. I describe it to people who don't know it as, sorry, who do know it as, the rescue robots and KISS players kind of continuity of what is appropriate to
Mm,
very inappropriate for kids. And so you can't just look at the Transformers brand and just know what you're getting,
yes.
because you will not necessarily love everything that you've gotten because it is very much on a massive spectrum. I
I
generally
appreciate the extremes of your spectrum, by the way. Well chosen.
Um, I feel like if there is anything more out on the edge than KISS players, I don't want to know about it. There's a hard line there, but as far as that goes, you never know what you're going to get. And uh, the Michael Bay Transformers and all that kind of stuff, like really, it really felt like they kind of soured the milk when it came to what a Transformers movie was going to be. And so I saw almost all of them until I think midway through, and then I just went, I can't possibly do that and do another one of these. But so you
How
never
many
know what
Mark Wahlberg ones did you get into?
I got. The one where I quit was actually him talking about the laws about
Oh
underage.
yeah, that is in a movie, let alone a movie based on toys, is flabbergasting.
That basically I hit that wall and went, no, I mean, like maybe in
That's
a
the right time to leave those movies. Fair.
I just felt like that was going to. So again, I never know what I'm going to get. And it sounds like this is towards that middle. But it is an interesting story. There's a lot going on. There is and every take on it brings something special and different towards it. And I feel that that can be done very well and it can be done very badly. And if it sounds like this one's done very well, I will certainly be interested in looking at it. My interest in Transformers peaked with the movie. I wasn't really a fan before. It was on around when G.I. Joe was, so I watched it. But the movie, it was like, okay, I've never seen anything like this. This is the most hardcore rockin' thing I have ever seen. They flat out executed all the good guys at the beginning. Whoa. And so I went back and started enjoying the rest of the old Transformers stuff a lot more. Never really collected it much as toys. I still have them though. When I was an adult, I got all the really big ones because, that was the wish fulfillment of actually having an income. And the toys were so much better than they were when they were the small ones. But so yeah, I let it go usually, but it's very nice to see that they are doing something good with the property. And so I can understand now why you were really excited to work on it.
So before we get into the book, we should summarize the movie because I was just
Oh, right.
explaining why it's good, but we didn't actually
Ah,
talk about any of the plot points. So we're on Cybertron. We're on Cybertron long after the creation story, but long before the Civil War. Like there's no real sign of civil unrest, except that there are the haves and there are have-nots. There are the Cybertronians with a T-Cog, which allows them to change shapes, they transform, and then there are the ones without a T-Cog, and they are just called bots, and sometimes pejoratively called cogless. But there's definitely a divide between the ones that have these multiple shapes and the ones that are stuck just being robots. And the robot ones tend to also be doing a lot of the menial tasks, especially from what we follow, mining for energon, because now there is an energon, not surplus, the opposite of a surplus,
shortage.
shortage, yeah. So there is an energon shortage, and so the miners are going deeper and deeper into Cybertron to tap new veins and try and get more energon. All of our main characters are bots. So Orion Pax, who we all know, turns into Optimus Prime to the point that I may accidentally call him Optimus Prime, even though technically he's Orion Pax for the majority of the movie. There's D16, who will be Megatron, B127, who will be Bumblebee, and Elita 1, who is always Elita 1. And crucially, Optimus Prime and Orion Pax and D16 are friends. They both work under Elita 1 as miners, and Elita 1 does not like either of them. And then they only meet up with Bumblebee later, B127. And he's kind of been like sent to this part of Cybertron that doesn't exist on any records. And it's clearly because he's so annoying that he pissed off the wrong person and was exiled, but told he had a job to do there. And so, yeah, he was sent there, and he's wackier than you would expect. Like he's not all there, and that's not something that was conveyed in the trailer. Because again, you cannot talk about how good this movie is without bringing up the trailer and contrasting it with some of the poor choices. Because a lot of the humor comes with things B127 says in the trailer, but without the context of why he's like that. Instead, he just looks like the fast-talking silly guy, but he's like, oh no, this guy's been through a lot and is trying to stay rosy about everything, but like everyone else around him is like, oh, well, this guy. So throughout the whole first act, Orion Pax is trying to find the matrix of leadership. And this goes to the characterization that I was saying I really liked, where he is doing his job as a miner. He is doing everything he thinks that has to be done and everything that's told of him. But in his spare time, he's breaking the rules, he's being a little bit rebellious, but in the, like, pushing towards a good cause. He thinks that the matrix of leadership will help them restore Energon. And the more he digs into the mystery, the weirder it is that, like, we've got history up to this point, and then we've got history up to that point. And in that gap, the Matrix goes missing, and nobody knows where it is. And so, like, he becomes a little bit obsessed about trying to find this. And in doing that, because he's breaking rules, he bumps into Transformer authorities, and often has to get bailed out by D16, who is a total rules follower, and kind of gets super frustrated with his best friend, who is constantly breaking the rules. But then his best friend explains to him why it's the right thing to do, and D16 kind of comes around. But that's a reoccurring thing between these two characters. They are constantly arguing between doing what's right and following the rules. Which, again, sets up an interesting dynamic, because the rebellious one is the one who ends up being the ultimate good guy, and the rules follower ends up being the ultimate bad guy. Things progress, they get exiled. There are several cool scenes that I'm skipping over, just because if I cannot summarize everything in this movie that's cool, because that's the whole movie. So anyway, they get exiled, they accidentally get Elita 1 dragged into their exile, and she's extra upset with them. But now the four of them are on Cybertron's surface. They stumble across, they get a beacon that, like, is tracking them to a location that Orion Pax is convinced that the Matrix of Leadership is going to be there. Like, all of the dots on his conspiracy board connect with this one thing once he gets that one beacon. And he shows up there. They realize that the energon shortage is not a natural occurrence, that energon should be flowing perpetually across across Cybertron, and everyone should have it. They also are told by Alpha Trion, who is the only original Prime that's still functional, although he's deactivated until they come across him. They find out that no Cybertronian is made without a T-Cog. So the have-nots who understand they've got a worse lot in life, but just accept that that's how they were. Someone is manufacturing their oppression, and they are, D16 in particular, is mad about that. And so, again, talking about the intelligence of the story, this is a highly politicized, and yet still, like, everyone is easy to empathize with, especially the character that it goes on to be the villain. Like, it is fascinating how well they thread so many needles with a movie that commercially failed. From there, I think we can just kind of go, it's like, this is where it gets more action-oriented, this is where things progress, but as far as what we need to know to understand the source book, that's where we are. We realize that there is a conspiracy to, somebody has stolen T-Cogs from these Transformers, and they have stripped Cybertron of its natural resources. And, there's one twist that you have to say, but you will probably see coming, because you know enough about Transformers, but Sentinel Prime is the guy in charge of Iacon City, which is where most of this movie takes place. We don't really get a great idea of what is happening in the other cities on Cybertron, only that we know that there are other cities and that this is just kind of a snapshot in like the major metropolitan area. Anyway, so he is effectively the leader of Cybertron, but it ends up he's not a Prime. He killed the original 13 Prime, came back with a tall tale about how he is now the only Prime and that the Matrix leadership disappeared. And he is trading off the Energon. Like, everything that is happening that's bad for the miners is Sentinel's fault for Sentinel's benefit. Which, highly relatable in the modern day.
I can't imagine a con artist taking over an entire government. That'd be ridiculous.
And so, now we get to talk about the Transformers ONE sourcebook.
Well, one thing I want to comment on, though.
Yes.
Cybertron is the body of Primus, the Transformers god. So when you're mining for Energon, you aren't actually mining for Energon. You are literally stealing the blood and energy from the god.
Yes. That they actually, I don't think Primus is ever mentioned except for maybe as like an exclamation in the movie. We can assume that, yes, Cybertron is in fact Primus, just in his alt mode, which he takes millennia to convert out of. But, yeah, that's something that's, even though like the movie goes into a lot of the history of the setting, including a lot of stuff about the 13 Primes, but Primus and Unicron comes before them and is not touched on so much in this movie.
Interesting. Okay, so you give me the ground thing. You sold me on going to see it. Let's talk about the book.
All right. So shortly after the movie came out, I got contacted by Ben, and he was saying we are working on the Transformers ONE tie-in source book, which even like the movie was out before this project got underway, so it was never meant to come out at the same time as the movie. So for whatever relevance that is, that's the order of events. But it did mean that I had seen it in theaters, and it had not left theaters yet, so I was able to schedule a second viewing after I knew I had this assignment, so I can go and take notes. Because the benefit of adapting Transformers ONE is that because it's its own self-contained movie that was supposed to be like a ramp off for more things in this universe, but for now, this is all we had. That is much easier to tap into than the entire connected universe of Transformers for everything else. So we knew where it began, we knew where it ends. The parameters of the project were very clear to us. Downside is that because it was still in theaters, even the Transformers Wiki was light on details. And Transformers Wiki, while absurdly written, is extremely well upkept. Someone on the Renegade Discord, so Galaxy Convoy likes to point out that the G.I. Joe information on the Transformers Wiki is more involved and up to date than on the G.I. Joe Wiki, just because Transformers is crossed over with G.I. Joe, and so any question you might have, you can ideally find on the Transformers Wiki. So we had much more concentrated area to focus on, which was cool. But we were on our own to like gather information. It's not like they provided us with a copy of the movie to watch repeatedly on our own. So, you know, I watched it 2 times. I spent about a week just watching every single testimonial and review on YouTube, and then I broke it down as much as I could. So I was not the project lead on this, as I often am on the GI Joe books, which frankly I did not realize how much of this book I wrote until just recently when I was on the Banff podcast talking about it, because this felt like such a light project for me, and because compared to when I am a project manager, there was so much less to do. I was just told the words to write. I wrote that many words, and I turned it all over.
There is a coordination tax that every project pays. And I don't think people who are both the artist and the coordinator are ever going to really know it until you have that experience where you're not doing both of those things. It's like, oh, I have been running up the stairs. I ran up much faster. Oh, it's because I'm not carrying this giant backpack full of other people's work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that probably that resonates with me. But how did it affect your experience in the writing? Like you said, that was much light. You didn't even know how much you were doing. But how did it affect the writing experience? Was it better? Was it worse?
Well, like I said, it was super light. Like this was a very fun writing experience, and actually, I just want to take a step back because you did say that you know the project managers pay a price. I should also point out that when I do project managing, Renegade does pay me extra for those projects, and like they always take care of me. I know that the TTRPG industry is full of hobbyists that get into it professionally and sometimes don't know how to manage business, and sometimes that means people underselling how much they should be paid for projects and underestimating how much they should pay people for projects. Renegade is not that case. I've always been taken very well care of by Renegade. So just once again, I want to make that point clear. And then, so you were saying, how was the writing experience? Yeah, so it was nice because normally, like, leading up to a project, I'm like making sure that I do the most detailed outline I can so that when I hand over the sections that the assignments to the writers, sometimes I've done some of the recruiting of the writers too, so that's a lot of scrambling. Like, plates are turning before the project starts, and then, you know, and then there's the writing deadline. So always through the whole project, there is just deadlines and things looming over me. Whereas in this case, there was just the one deadline. I was given my word count, totally reasonable amount. In fact, Ben asked me how much I think I could handle, and I gave him a reasonable number. He assigned me basically what I asked for, and it was all just like nice, easy, professional. Very few situations where it was like, I don't know what to do. In fact, most of the time when I was writing my sections, I was coming up too close to my word count limits and had to pull back instead of having to fill up more space, which filling up space is the worst.
Meaningfully filling up space.
Mm-hmm. So I guess I'll just go over the sections that I worked on, and then I'll go over who else worked on the book with me. So I was given the entire introductory chapter and the entire chapter 2 character options, which on retrospect, I realized just how much of like this. That's one of the things that I realized. All right, I wrote the first 2 sections of this book, including everything that's going to be given to any of the characters that are interacting with it. That they really gave me a lot of nice stuff. Chapter 3 in the outline, 2 in the book is Transformers ONE. Sorry, Your Characters, Your Group, and it is a lot of the GMing stuff and about adapting a movie into a campaign setting, which I did not have anything to do with. That was all Michael Bramnick, I believe. It's Mike in the outline, and I'm pretty sure that's Michael Bramnick. Oh, no, it's not. Mike Pajola. Huh, I'm glad I double-checked. I'm not sure how much I've worked with Mike Pajola. Then we've got Threats and Contacts, and this was spread out across a lot of different writers. So I wrote, again, the introduction, and then there's 3 different versions of every character, of the 4 main characters.
And so you're meant to play those 4 main characters? Like this is around a fixed party or a planned party group?
Now let me double check if they are threats or pre-gens, I forget.
Because it's very interesting to me that oftentimes it's adjacent characters when you play in kind of a moving setting. You don't generally play the heroes. So it's interesting to me that, making that option available feels a lot different than other movie tie-in properties where it's like, yes, you're your own people because you can't be the stars, but you're the stars of your own story. So it's I think that there's some interesting that's an interesting departure, but one that I feel like resonates with the way that we play with toys. You always want to be the hero guy.
I found often with the toys, I always wanted to own the hero, but I always wanted to find the character that was very underserved in media and then just glam onto them and make them whoever I wanted them to be. Usually, a Mary Sue extension of myself type character.
And that's how you became a writer, and I became someone who controls computer systems. Um,
It all comes down to the toys and how you played with them. All right, so to address your question, they're all threats or contact stat blocks. So no pre-generated characters here. The idea is simply if you want to include them in your campaign and fight them, or have them combat capable, or whether you just want to have them as contacts, which is the nice, clean way of bringing in a named character without interfering too much in the going on at the table.
And we
We've
talked
also,
about that also sort of serves a purpose of saying, how strong are you? Well, you've seen these people, you know how strong they are.
mhm.
You can look at your character and your stats in comparison to them and go, oh, wow, I'm about as good as Orion Pax. He sucked a lot worse than I thought he did. Or I'm tougher. I could beat Megatron. So, at this level in his experience right now, which as we pointed out, Cobra Commander could do. So, um, anyway, please go on.
Yeah, so then the rest of the movie, or sorry, the rest of the threats and contacts section, I believe actually the rest of it is just threats. The only contacts are the main characters. But the rest of them are the characters that, have speaking roles and play prominent roles in the movie. And then just kind of a sampling of the bots that you see in the background, because there are a lot of crowd shots, and the crowd shots tend to be more generic models and yet recognizable color schemes. And so you can definitely pick out, so for example, Braun is one of the characters that was statted out. You can definitely pick out which of the characters listed as a notable Cybertronian or a common Cybertronian in the. Oh no, sorry, common Cybertronians are generic; they don't have names. The notable Cybertronians are the ones that we've statted up. So you've got RC, Brawn, Chromia, a lot of characters that may not have even been name checked or may have had their name briefly mentioned. Like Jazz has a scene where his leg gets crushed, and Alpha Trion has to choose between shutting down the mine and saving everyone, but sacrificing Jazz, or saving Jazz and then shutting down the mine, but risking, flooding the whole place with energon that kills everybody. So that was Jazz's role. He was victim. But instead of just making it generic victim, they made it definitely Jazz, which was nice.
Hmm. Not for jazz.
I mean, he got a speaking role. That pays scale. I don't entirely know what that means, but I know that it's an acting term. And I have a feeling you do, and you're debating whether to explain it or not. Let's not explain it.
Not
Let's
going to
move on.
explain it, but let me tell you, it gets you your union card, and that's a good thing.
Okay. All right. The next chapter is locations, and so it goes into just different scenes that we saw in the movie, and includes plot hooks and whatnot. And in the case of the Iacon 5000 racetrack, the Iacon 5000 race is one of those cool scenes that I brushed over when I was summing up the movie. But there are stats included for how to run the Iacon 5000. That was done by Jacob. And then we wrap up with the, let's see, it's campaigns and variations, but I believe it got a different name in the book. Campaigns and variations. So campaigns and variations is now just talking about what else we saw in the movie that could be like the split second stuff that, if you think about it, could lead to a whole other campaign arcs. And so it's got categories like the 13 Primes, which again is more of the backstory of the movie, alternate alliances, alternative origin stories, side stories, and unanswered questions, which if we're going to go chapter by chapter, we can get into that later.
Well,
How would you like to proceed?
so we're at the end of time for this, I believe. So maybe we're going to look at having another episode on the specific content from it, but just sort of from a perspective of, I'm going to buy this book. Do I buy this book because I really enjoyed the movie and want to get more lore, or is this something that I really need for my regular campaign, or is this kind of the thing that I need in order to be able to create a bunch of one shots that people will enjoy?
All right. So this book serves multiple masters, as the best books do. So obviously, if you want to do something set in the Transformers One universe, you absolutely need this. This has all the stats for things you see on screen, but isn't just a straight like that was on screen, so now it's in the book, and that's all you get. It expands on it and implies that there's a greater universe, and also introduces a bunch of options that create the options that you need to turn the Transformers core rulebook into the Transformers One movie. But it also is just a bunch of new options that are good for any Transformers campaign. So if you were just going into this for either options for your character or threats because you're the GM, this book, the majority of this book is that stuff. And I think we can just go long in this episode instead of trying to fill out another episode with them. So I will go over some of those options.
All right.
All right. So the character options is chapter 2, or no, actually it's chapter 1 according to the... I will always be messed up between what I thought of this for like months or sometimes even a year, and then what they actually end up in editing, after editing and in publication. So anyway, options comes with an origin, which is called bot, and it is for a non-transforming transformer. Let me start by saying, they grilled into us that you cannot use the word transform as the verb for converting, because even though they are transformers, if anything, any toy, and as a game, this falls under the category of toy. If it uses the verb transform to mean changing from a robot to a vehicle, then you are genericizing that verb, and anyone can use that verb, and therefore Hasbro loses the rights to their billion-dollar franchise's name. It becomes the Kleenex of toy lines. So we cannot say they transform. We say they convert. And we do not call them Transformers. That is the brand name, but there is no in-universe meaning to Transformer. They are Cybertronians and, you know, Autobots, Decepticons, like you call them by the planet they're from or the faction they're associated with. Then Transformers One comes out, and there are the Transformers and the bots. Flat out, in continuity, word for it. And of course, like, they're called Transformers because they are the ones who transform. And all throughout the movie, they use the verb transform, which apparently is okay in a movie, but not in tie-in products and not in action figures. So this book continues to use convert as the verb, as is mandated to us as authors working on the Transformers book. Every single Transformers role-playing game review that I ever read or saw makes some mention of how weird it is that we don't call it transforming, but there is a reason for it. It is a boring logistical reason that is way above our pay grade, but it is something we had to deal with. And so it became an extra step of having to deal with it when we were converting Transformers One, because now there are lore reasons that the word transformer exists. What do we do with that? And so we were told, put transformer in there, and then we will have legal talk to Hasbro, and then there will be a legal edit to if need be. But ends up, in that case, legal did not need to get involved. We were allowed to call the ones that can change shape Transformers, and everyone else bots. That was a lore-based distinction, but we still could not say that they transform. We still had to say they convert.
U.S. copyright law makes my nose bleed.
And I don't even know if this is a hard and fast rule anywhere, but just a domino effect that they can see leading to a genericization of their copyright. And so we've been told as licensees, licensees? I always get licensees and licensors mixed up. We are paying them for the license. So yes, we have to respect that very, very much. And we do. So anyway, all that to say, bots. There's a new origin for a bot, an Autobot that cannot convert, or sorry, not an Autobot, a Cybertronian that cannot convert, but that gives them a lot of flexibility. In fact, I have a fun line that talks about how even though they are stuck in one shape, it actually gives them a lot more, dynamics, flexibility. Like that was the theme of this. And so, yes, they are stuck in one mode, but that means they don't have giant wings that are actually slowing down their land speed. So in bot mode, they're faster than the average bot. They have, they get a general perk. There's just a lot of flexibility in what you can do with this this origin, because it's an origin within an alt mode, and therefore, for all the flexibility, you are losing a main purpose of the origins of Transformers and why it's what separates those origins from every other origin in the game. But yeah, so even though there's only the one origin in this, because it's broad and generic enough, you can create an entire cast, like an entire party using this one origin, and everyone can be significantly different.
All right. Got me so far.
All right. Then we went to the influences. This was fun because, again, I was assigned influences, so I didn't have to come up with any. And Ben's idea was that we should have one that really defines the character, the main character trait of each of our four main characters, and then a couple more that, like, we've got minor to just as a broad one that covers a whole lot of ground, and high guard initiate, which represents the. I didn't even talk about them, but yeah, so. No, I'll talk about them in a second. So yes, the influences are all attitude based. They are tied into the different characters, but it's attitudes like ambitious. So if you make a character and you choose the ambitious influence, even though that's the D16/Megatron one, people aren't going to read that and be like, "Oh, you're just building a copy of Megatron." No, it's based on that character, but generic enough that if anyone takes it, they will still feel like their own character. Dutiful, same thing. That is Elita 1. She is even more rulesy and by the books than D16. Although, really, those two could apply to both of those characters. I've often found that the Transformers influences are a little too purposeful, and there's not enough of them that are a little more playful and a little more flexible. And so when you're choosing a Transformers influence, you often get like just locked into a very specific theme. So I like the broadness of the influences that I was allowed to design in here, thematically speaking. And that's another reason that I think that even though there's only a half dozen or so new influences in this book, they really broaden the influence options across Transformers as a setting.
Hmm.
We have
Yeah,
two new factions. Oh, go on.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm taking a
Oh,
second.
all right, fine. I was just thinking that when you said that, I was thinking, lawful evil versus lawful good. That is sort of
Very
the
much there. So there, the movie is about a chaotic good and lawful neutral best friend, and the lawful neutral's descent to lawful evil.
all right.
Yeah, that is that's the character driven part of the story. There's also a plot driven element, and there's so much to this movie, Charles. I'm telling you. Yes, we got to add new factions. So Transformers only has two factions up till now. It has Autobots and it has Decepticons. The Techno-Organic Secrets, a book that I didn't have anything to do with, it introduced the idea of factions as influences, which goes back to what I was saying about like influences are very much more specific in that. And I don't quite understand why that decision was made, but that's the direction they went there. So a lot of familiar factions, the Maximals, Dinobots, you are still also an Autobot or also a Decepticon, and it just doesn't play the same way that factions were outlined in the Field Guide to Action and Adventure and how we've used them in G.I. Joe. So I was glad when I got the outline that it's just straight up, and now you're adding just two factions. You replace Autobot or Decepticon with either autonomous bots or the High Guard. So the High Guard were the people that were protecting the Primes when they went up to the surface before Sentinel ambushed them and like betrayed them. And they were just kind of left up there, and they became this like guerrilla band of warriors who anytime someone would come back to the surface, they would attack them. And they all became resource starved and therefore more desperate and like slowly corrupted. And they end up teaming up with D16, and they're very clearly the ones that become the Decepticons, to the point that Starscream, Soundwave, Shockwave, they're all in that group, and the main ones that the characters interact with.
They actually called them autonomous bots. That was a joke that my character in our thing made, like right from the very beginning of him. Anyway, sorry, complete diversion, but that's hilarious.
I don't remember if that was what they were outlined as, or if I did that possibly even as a nod to you.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
All right. So yes. So what's nice about autonomous bots? There's a couple of things. One is that it is no longer tied to being a robot or having an alt mode. And so if you want to do a character like Spike in a Transformers campaign, you can have him. You can use the autonomous bots rules to be like, he's a card carrying member of the Autobots, but he doesn't benefit from any of the rules of the Autobot faction. Here's a faction that you do benefit from these rules. In fact, Spike's a great example because when we get to the equipment, there's a new type of weapon trait called a tool, which is basically the tools that that are so deadly that you can use them to hurt people. You are qualified in tools as an autonomous bot. And since Spike and Sparkplug Witwicky in the original animated series were construction workers, it totally makes sense that Spike would be qualified with these tools. And then the High Guard is also just like another take on a Decepticon type organization. But if you don't like the Decepticon faction, or you just want to explore a different story, the High Guard gives you another option. High Guard is a little more specific, whereas autonomous bots can easily be rewritten as these are the evil bots, even though this is written coded to be good. And again, can be just carried over to any campaign. It doesn't have to just be a Transformers One campaign. General perks, I told this story on Banff, but I'll tell it again because it's funny. So I was given 1,000 words or so to work on general perks, and my first thought was that all of the origins in every book leading up to now has something called the crew capacity and fire points, which is basically how many people can sit in you, and if they're sitting in you, how many you can lean out and shoot. None of which applies to Cybertron because nobody has crew in Cybertron. And so I was like, well, we can either just ignore those origins if you're using one of those origins in Cybertron, or I can introduce a whole bunch of general perks where you can convert your crew space into another function. You can have extra weapons, you can have heavy armor, you can have what's the freight carrier. So technically crew can only be common sized characters. Freight carrier lets you be Ultra Magnus and actually carry actually carry other Cybertronians. So I wrote out all of these as the first bunch of general perks that I was going to suggest for the book. And then I realized that I'd used up my entire word count. And I was like, well, I was told to just make general perks. And if all of them are related to this one, swap out your crew capacity, which the one origin in this book does not even have crew capacity, so none of them apply to it. That is not going to deliver on the promise of this section. So I found ways to condense a lot of the language, and like anything that was crossed over against all of them, I put it all into one sidebar so I didn't have to repeat it over and over again. And that freed up a few hundred words that I could then do things that are more thematically tied to the movie, or, scenes that things we see the characters doing in scenes. And then finally, the equipment. I say finally, there might be more. No, equipment option is what finishes off this chapter. So like the general perks, I was just told you make some new equipment based on the movie to this word count. Like sometimes on the outlines, it's very specific, like do this version of Alpha Trion from this point in the movie. Here's what his threat stat block is, here's what his threat level is, and whatever. And then you just have to like condense all your creativity into a specific outline. And sometimes it really is just like, here's the category, you know how to do this stuff in the category, fill this number of word count. So when I went back and rewatched the movie, I realized nobody has weapons hanging off them like we're used to, because this is before the war. So I'm supposed to come up with a bunch of new weapons for a movie where nobody has weapons, except for like one or two characters. And so what I did realize is that we do see them using these giant hefty tools when they are mining, and they do come back into it later. And so I just came up with the idea that like a tool is a weapon that even the base effect has a downshift because it's not supposed to be used that way, but it has a trait called tool, which lets you treat it like a kit. So it is both a kit and a weapon, just a clumsy weapon. This might be my favorite thing that I added to the book, just because it works so well. Like it's just, I love when theme and concept works with mechanics, that you look at the thing, well, they all get penalties, but it makes sense that they get penalties because, again, they're tools. And also that it's a nice scattering of some are limited, some are standard, some are restricted. Actually, no, sorry, none of them are standard. Some of them are finesse, some of them are might-based. Like, I checked a nice variety of boxes so that anyone can have a tool and find a use for it, and also that some of them are one-handed, some of them are two-handed. There's a surprising variety from a bunch of weapons that are all the same thing, a tool that can be used as a weapon.
And that's, a lot of the weapons you see in martial arts are started out that way as well. And I get it thematically because if this is about Rise Up and pre-revolution, what happens next, these people who are going to be revolting and rioting, they don't have guns. They're not the government. They've got these tools. And so if this does go further, I think you probably see a lot more mileage out of that particular piece too. And I think it's actually going to be very reusable in kind of improvised weaponry. Like there is improvised weaponry, you can do improvised weaponry, but when it comes down to it, though, this is, I think, a better class of improvised weaponry, and maybe it lets you do some of the MacGyver stuff with a little bit better stat support. So I like that idea as something to take out with it.
I'm going to put a pin in you mentioning MacGyver. Maybe for a couple of episodes from now, we'll talk about this. Oh yeah, and also a shout out to the Transformers Wiki because they have a page of every Cybertronian tool, most of which are just names mentioned as just like, we need this pen to be fancy, so it's a cyber pen or whatever. And so I tapped into all of those names to apply to a lot of these tools because a lot of them don't have any kind of description, have never been pictured. So for the first time, we get more of an idea of what some of these are. So I'm expanding on stuff from the canon, even if it's not necessarily from Transformers One. But yeah, so
And
that
to
is
the
the
wiki editors who are out there at 3 o'clock in the morning processing the edits to make
my
sure that
heroes.
everything is correct, recognize this. Eventually, somebody's going to need it and use it, and it's going to end up as part of the stuff that you love. So never stop. Well, stop, go to bed, drink water, but never think it's not valuable.
So you asked me who this book is for, and I started by saying that it is for people who want Transformers One specifically. Then I said for people that just want options. We went over the options. The third group of people that this book is very much for is people who just want more about Cybertron. So the locations in this are very adaptable no matter what point in the timeline you are, and the core rulebook only covers being on Earth, and then there's been hints of the fact that Transformers can be a spacefaring or intergalactic civil war type story. But this is the first time that we've really explored that. And so maybe somewhere down the line, we will just have a Transformers in Space book. But until then, you have your Cybertron book here as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting. This times very well because just released for Energon Protocols is the adventure that you and I played on Cybertron, and Eric had to basically create his Cybertron from whole cloth because there really wasn't a whole lot there to support what it really was. There's some stuff in the comics, and there's other continuities that you can grab, the look and feel from, but realistically, game support for what Cybertron is, he had to start over from then. So. Having explored that, I'm really interested in seeing what it looks like from that support side because it was a really good arc. I really enjoyed being on Cybertron, and so that kind of speaks to me as well. Is seeing what those settings are because it's dramatically different than everything everywhere else. One of the themes in the thing that we played was there's no food and water on Cybertron.
Yep.
Right? There just isn't. So the things that you would normally think you could do to survive, you couldn't do. And being able to visualize that and see that when we're all used to living on Earth, and even if you live in the city, usually sometimes it rains, most of the world. But not being able to visualize that, I think that having a resource that helps wrap your brain around how absolutely alien that is, would be an interesting tool to have. And so if I did want to have adventures there, I really think it's valuable to just to have something which is authoritative and specific to the game that I'm playing in order to be able to have that content. So that's interesting to me.
All right, you ready to wrap things up?
You need to do the shout outs because we're over time. Now we're not this is not one of those gymnastic nights where we
No.
have actually hard limits, but yeah, jump to the shout outs.
All right, this is something I should have shouted out a few weeks ago. There is a podcast called How to Make a Literal Cat in Your Favorite RPG. And what they do is that they learn a new RPG for every episode, and they do everything they can to, within the rules of the RPG, create a cat PC, like a literal house cat. And a few weeks ago, maybe even a couple of months ago at this point, they did it with G.I. Joe. And at the end, they force themselves to keep going no matter what they're doing, and then at the end they will rate how much they had to break the rules or stretch the rules to make their cat. So they made a circus cat with a jetpack. So you will definitely want to check it out and see just how easy it is to make a cat with the G.I. Joe RPG. And honestly, I started listening to it because they did a G.I. Joe episode, and of course I'm curious. I was engaged for the entire 45 minutes to an hour that the episode went on. They know their stuff, they do their research, and they're funny guys.
Awesome.
And also, I'm shouting out to Word Burglar, who, of course, provides our theme song, as we'll mention when we do the call to action. But I mentioned a couple episodes, or last episode, that he's got a project coming out called Rhymes with Comics. What I didn't know is that it's a comic. I thought it was an album, but no, it is a comic called Word Burglar Rhymes with Comics. And it will be launching on Kickstarter soon. I don't know any more about it than that, but I am curious. I know that, what's his name, Sean? Anyway, Word Burglar. I know that Word Burglar does some writing. In fact, I have a comic he wrote, like an ash can, called Snaker's Pizza, and it is about Serpentor running a pizzeria. It's, serial numbers filed off Serpentor, but as clearly the concept. I should have dug it out so I could put it up on screen. I'll have to find a copy to, digitally put it up there. So I don't know exactly how many comics he's written, but I know he's worked at a comic shop for years, and he is deeply in love with this stuff, and a very clever lyricist. So I'm looking forward to what he does with the Word Burglar Rhymes with Comics comic.
Beautiful. All right, going to wrap us up.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of Upshift. If you'd like to hear more great gaming podcasts, you can go to nodirectionpodcast.com, where you will find podcast blogs, including my Essential Builds blog, which builds a wacky pop culture character using Essence20 options every couple of weeks. Also, thank you to our patrons. You can find out more at patreon.com/nodirection if you'd like to help us keep the lights on and the stream running. And thank you to Word Burglar for the use of Letters from Snake Eyes Part 4. You can find out more at wordburglar.com. Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Charles Cushman.
This has been Upshift.
Awesome.